Damon. I'm sitting here with Ben Affleck, my very old friend, and the star of The Way Back, which is what we're here to talk about today. So my first question would probably be to start at the beginning. How'd you get involved with it? Why this movie? Was it the script? Was it, obviously you have a relationship with Gavin. You guys made a great movie already together, so there's got to be a good bond there. What happened? Fill us in. How'd it go?
Hey, it's weird doing this with you. It's like
I know.
it's like you're really.
I know. Well, you're going to answer questions that I already know the answers to them because you told me at the time. But this is for the benefit of everyone else and to give some insight into. Look, you've had this great career, and we've been at this for a long time, and we're still working, which is great. So what?
Yeah, I mean, the movie was basically one of those things. Like, I just got the script sent to me by our agent, Patrick Weitzel, who's a brilliant guy and has great taste. And Brad Slater originally, I think, found it, and Brad Inglesby wrote it. And I just was exactly the kind of thing that I wanted to do. It was obvious to me that it was would be a really interesting acting challenge, and it would require a lot and a sort of run the gamut of emotions and all that stuff, and that it would kind of live or die on the performance. And that was really the thing that I'm sort of just much more interested in doing right now, and a risk to some extent, but also, and also had to be done well because of the sports and our familiarity now with sports and HD and the way they're covered. Like, you can't do major league anymore. You know what I mean? You kind of know, like, some of those guys aren't pro athletes. There's just, although baseball players are a little bit different, but like, there's just something about, and I wasn't, thank God, I have to play a pro athlete.
I have seen you play basketball.
So I was like, maybe no seat where I shoot it. But
so let me. But did you read the script, and then did you approach Gavin?
And I had worked. I knew Gavin and thought of him right away because he had both the kind of. It was much more important, really, the sensibility about, like, just his taste in performance and storytelling. But also, I knew from Miracle and Warrior that he really kind of he knew how to shoot athletics and sports in a way that was both realistic and wouldn't be sort of cheesy and artificial. And I knew that the movie would be really weakened by a kind of false sense of victory, or if it just fell into the classic sort of genre. I mean, on the one hand, obviously, like, the great basketball movie for me is Hoosiers. So there's definitely that kind of hanging over your head, Gene Hackman being like, "I love you guys," it's like, not to think about that. And there's alcoholism in that movie, and it's, in some ways it's similar, but it's, I thought Gavin was the first and only person I thought of in terms of a guy who could do it, all the things that were required, and do it well. And I also had a relationship with him where I really trusted that he and I shared the same taste. Like, with The Accountant was a very kind of classic, could have just been about shooting people and fighting people, and he was much more interested in the kind of aspect of the character being on the spectrum and doing that research, and he came with me, and he just was it was evident to me, both by the work that he put into it and how much he cared, and the final product, that he was somebody whose kind of taste was aligned with mine. And it's just really important, especially for a movie like this that's so nuanced, and if a guy picks a few of the wrong takes, it could potentially sort of throw the whole thing off. And you want help, you know what I mean? You kind of giving, I'm going to give you a range of drunk here and a range of sad. It's a process of, really, it's about losing a child, you know what I mean? And coming to terms with grief, and coming to terms with, like, really hard, difficult, tragic, immutable things that happen in your life, and how you recover from them, and what you do. And as a consequence, like, how much you don't want to hammer the audience over the head, because I think people just recoil at a certain point if it's just too much. By the same token, you don't want to soft pedal it. So, I mean, for all the reasons that you well know, the director was just the most important thing about this, and I was really excited to work with Gavin. And as soon as he read it, he was psyched and signed on. And so, we were kind of off and running. And it's a drama, which they aren't making very many theatrically of these days. We didn't have a bunch of money to do it, but we had enough, and we were able to get it done. I knew we could shoot fast, and and still get the right stuff and get the right coverage. Edu Grau, the DP, was really good. Kind of helped us with the feeling of realism and authenticity, because if you don't believe that I'm this guy and I'm going through this stuff, it feels false or artificial. It's just you're dead,
It is, it's completely like, if that script came to me, I would kind of make the same assessment, which would be, this is entirely performance based, which is, as you say, kind of a risk, right? So what is it? I mean, Gavin gets great performances from his actors in all of his movies. And what is it about, and so do you, by the way, as a director. So you were talking about taste, and what is it specifically about how he works? Is he the kind of director who just, you guys kind of talk it out and then you just go do it? Or is he in there with you?
On the one hand, there's not like sometimes there can be kind of almost too much talk. You know what I mean? Or I feel like it just gets, it's like, I can't, you got to sort of be on the same page, come with the preparation, kind of have the same level of understanding. And if you're trying to do too much, in my experience anyway, like calibration all over the place on the set, and there's 45 minutes between takes, you can't really, for me, play that, you know what I mean? So on the one hand, he's got a really complicated and nuanced understanding of human behavior and the way people act and doing things kind of against expectations. But he also doesn't sort of talk it to death, and he gives you room to sort of try things. And he's also really smart about how to adjust performance editorially. So like a lot of times, it's one of the things we did with the autism on the account, and the same with this, with whether it was like the degree of emotion that I was showing, or the degree of drunkenness, or whether, or how much I did or didn't want to show that I missed my ex-wife. We would kind of do like, let's do a 3, a 5, and a 7, and maybe a 9. You know what I mean? And then, so that he could have those sort of knobs to turn a little bit if it turned out like, geez, that seems kind of flat, or no, it's too much. You can't be, sobbing in the first act. It's just we have nowhere to go, kind of a thing. And so, he was really receptive to, and I trusted that he would use the right ones. Sometimes, obviously, you're scared and you feel like, or directors that just do a couple of takes, and it's like you got to lock in what you're going to do, commit to it, and get it right. And that wasn't the case here. I trusted him to give him a whole kind of scope of stuff, and that he would kind of find the right way to do it in the editing room.
And once you get going, is he kind of guy who leans into that momentum? So he's not going to stop and like sit and talk it to death for, note you to death. He's just going to kind of let you go on a roll and just kind of.
Yeah, it's like with this movie, this character, for whatever reason, the place I was in my life, the degree of familiarity I had with some of the themes, and just the way that as a parent, your greatest fear is losing a child. Absolutely, and without question. And because I had children, I just was able to tap into a lot of that stuff. And, there's this weird paradox for me about acting, where when it's the best, it sort of feels the easiest and flows the most natural. And
right.
A lot of times I would just kind of look at him after take, and he, you know what I mean? And we were kind of in the right place, and he kind of saw what I was doing, and we just would keep going. And because there is something to, like, if you're doing a ton of stopping and talking and hashing it out, that's sort of how it feels to me when it's not going that well. You know
Sure.
what I mean? You're kind of not finding it or not getting it. And this was one that just kind of just felt like it just sort of fell into place. And we do a couple, and I'd say, like, I think that's right. And, we were just sort of on the same page, and it just felt great. And it's like we were saying before we got on this thing, there's something about acting and movies and plays, and the sort of chemistry and combination of it, the writing, the directing, the acting, the photography, the production, the whole thing, it somehow kind of sometimes falls together really well, or it doesn't, and it's a little bit elusive and mysterious to me. But this was one where it just kind of, like, I remember telling you when I was doing it, like, I think I'm doing the best stuff I've ever done. I'm really happy with this. Maybe it'll be a disaster, but
Right.
like, it feels great. I feel great every day at work. I feel really cathartic coming home. I mean, considering it's a story about this guy who's an alcoholic and is mourning the loss of his child and his divorce and just living in this apartment doing nothing but drinking a case of beer every night, like I loved coming home every day. I loved going to work. I mean, I think it's weird people understand because they always go like, "It wasn't that just hard and depressing?" And it's like, actually, it was really satisfying, really thrilling, really interesting, really cathartic to genuinely kind of go through that sort of range of emotions every day, to feel like I accomplished what I wanted to. Like, yeah, it was sometimes kind of tragic and painful, but it's just so much more interesting and fun than trying to get blood from a stone, with something where that's just not there. No matter how much you try to backstory it and mine it and make something up and throw a different spin on it, you're only going to drill so deep. You know what I mean? And also, interestingly for me, like this movie really, with the scenes, I love the young guys who played the basketball players. I love being around them. And for me, kind of winning their respect as like a person and an actor, and was kind of how I connected to winning their respect as a coach. You know what I mean? If the actors all thought I was just like an asshole who did, you know what I mean? Like stuck, disconnected and didn't, I wanted them to feel my investment in them as people. And I thought that would kind of translate. And it really reminded me of School Ties.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. That was literally because that's almost 30 years ago, and we were the age of these guys, these young actors that are with you. And I remember you writing to me in the middle, just being like, "Oh my God!" Like you were having these flashbacks because I remember looking up to Jelko, for instance, on School Ties, and we saw an older actor, who we idolized, and I wondered to what extent that made this thing kind of fresh and new. Somebody who's been making movies for 30 years, and suddenly these kids come along and it's their first big feature, and all that excitement. Like, what did that feel like?
It was wonderful. Like, first of all, they were great guys, and getting to hang out with them. And that's one thing Malick told me that was really, Terrence Malick told me that was like, was like, Ben, make sure you always spend time with people in their 20s who are fresh in life and have a new perspective. And
that's great.
He's like, we get ossified, and these guys were, some of them in their late teens, and of course they're all actors. So what they were talking about was auditions and casting directors in this part, and I didn't get that, and like I ended up recommending one of them to Pete Farrelly, end up casting Will in something, and it just reminded me of that time when we were just trying to get a job, just so happy to be there, like on the set acting, you know what I mean? And I was, I played a left guard in School Ties. I probably had 10 lines. I was the bully, but it was so much fun just to be getting to do the thing I wanted to do, and being around those people and talking to, the other actors, Brendan and Chris and Randall and Anthony and those guys, about like who was up for what, and the other guys who had the smaller parts as kind of player. It just reminded me of how much I just loved acting, and how lucky I am and fortunate and grateful I am to be able to do this, and to still be doing it, and to have had this run of time. And it reminded me, like, I'm really lucky. I love this job.
Yeah. That's great, man. Well, and far from ossifying, though, I would say that the work you've been doing is the opposite of that. And I think as young actors, we were so excited to be there that it's like you push a little more, and you really let this thing come to you in a way. It's like that kind of acting that we always talk about, and what we really love, and that kind of Gene Hackman. Like there's a richness and a fullness underneath everything, even if you're not doing a lot, you know what I mean? And that was just really, I just want to know what you attribute that to in your own work, because it's really evident in your work, is it what you've gone through in life? Is it the hard-earned wisdom you have? Is it just doing it more? So you've done it, is it, we talked about being as younger guys when we were writing, how it helped inform our acting. Now you're directing, you're producing. So how is doing all those different things helping? How is just life? How is just doing it more helping? Like,
I think it's all the things that you mentioned have kind of enriched my life as an actor. One is I learned a lot about acting and directing. Just from being on the other side of it and kind of watching what works and what doesn't. And all of a sudden it's so obvious that an actor is pushing and trying to show you something. And that was how I like, don't sell me something, you know what I mean? Get me to lean forward. And I always loved those actors. And then when I directed, I understood why, because they brought me to them because they didn't do anything.
Right.
And it's scary. It's a risk. You know what I mean? Because like, well, it'll be flat. It'll be empty. It won't be interesting. It'll be not. I'm supposed to be angry. You know, you have all these things as and they're all the wrong instincts in a way. I mean, yes, you have to feel that. You have to experience it. You have to recreate it, but in a way that's not, that you're not selling the audience anything. And so that was just a kind of a good acting lesson that I learned from directing. And also, you know, when you're 24, you just haven't lived that much, you know, and I've had a really diverse, rich, good, bad, great, awful set of experiences in my life, and spent a lot of time thinking about them and learning about them and reflecting on them. And because I have a broader life experience now, like at 48, I just have so much more to draw. Would never have been able to play this part, I don't think,
Right.
you know, without having had children, for example, or maybe getting divorced, or maybe, you know, they're all kind of, and I don't think, you know, you have to have been the person or gone through the exact thing to play the thing. And I'm a recovering alcoholic, and this guy's an alcoholic, but his alcoholism is manifested in a very different way than mine. You know, I mean, it's not really the kind of thing where it's just sort of all the same. It's in some ways it's really, it's just as foreign to me as if I weren't an alcoholic. But by the same token, having gone through all that different stuff just enriches you as a person. And I think if you're connected to that and aware of it and mindful of it, you just have more access to it. And that in combination with not feeling like, you know, like knowing it's there. I don't have to show you it's there.
So that's really interesting and true and great. And I get, because you are who you are now as a director too. I mean, you've directed a Best Picture at this point. You've kind of ticked every box that there is. But I remember when we when we were
Good
doing
and bad.
good and bad. That's all right. But when we were doing Goodwill, and it was the first time we'd ever sat on the other side of an audition. And I remember you and I as young actors, and we started this in our early teens, going to New York together and everything, with a kind of combative mentality, like, fuck, I'm gonna fucking show them kind of thing. And it wasn't until we were suddenly, we'd written this script and it was getting made, and we were sitting with Gus Van Sant on the other side and actors were coming in, that I realized, oh my God, I've had this all wrong. I'm desperate for you to be great and for you to get this part. And I think to the point you were just making, sometimes actor, you know, you have so little control as a young actor that when you get something, it's almost like you're trying to hold on to it and you're trying to audition for your next thing. You know what I mean? And just, so could you speak to young actors, actresses, everybody watching, kind of as the director that you are now, and at 30 years down the road of having done this, like,
I mean, I would really echo what you said, like that experience we had watching actors come in for the first time, and we were just sort of sitting there kind of invited into the room, you know, while Gus and Billy Hopkins kind of went through that process, and to directing and actually sort of making the decisions. You know, I mean, there's a few simple things that I never saw anybody get a part who was reading off the page.
That's a great point. And that's something you said to me when I did Promised Land with John Krasinski, and we were looking at people, and I couldn't believe it. I just lamented every single time I went into an audition room like this, you know, and looking, I mean, I just,
you're just not going to get the job.
Well, and because you see about half the actors, at least half the actors are coming in off book and good, right? And so it's like you immediately just cut the bottom half off and like, you guys go home. This is the group that we're looking at. Yeah. So sorry.
And also, I mean, it speaks to just the preparation, commitment, how much, and that stuff really matters. And it also allows you to relax. And that's the other thing. It's just, and they're both, it's just, they're not pushing it. It's just so counterintuitive, but so important. Like the more relaxed you are, the more loose you are, the more, I remember like feeling that if I had just done a movie, I would be better in the next, you know what I mean? If you're comfortable in front of the camera and you're feeling relaxed in the environment of the set, and there is so much to be said for relaxation. Like as a director, when I started, I remember saying to the actors, we're just going to do 5 takes, and we're not even going to talk about it. We're just going to do that, and I don't even care what it happens or what it is. And then we'll just start like figuring it out from there. And I won't ever stop until you're really happy. So like just to take that out of their mind the
Yeah.
idea that I'm goal oriented. You know, you have to
Yeah.
get there, get the thing.
Right.
Because you know, because in my experience, that's not it. It's a lot of it's about discovery. It's about allowing things to happen. It's yeah, you have to be prepared and really understand your character and what's happening, but then you also have to be able to let the, you know, live realistically and imagine circumstances. And so, you know, doing that with actors, you told me that Scorsese would say like, great, two more. And
that's right. Yeah, that was literally, yeah. He would when he got one he loved, he would say, great, two more. And I realized, oh, that's his way of unburdening the person. It's not one more. This isn't my last chance to do it ever in the world, right? And as a young actor, you get limited takes. You're not number one on the call sheet usually. You're usually below number 5, and below number 5 means,
and you might be tied into a 2-shot, and that they're going to use, or that we're going to use the one with the good crane move.
But he used the one where number 1 on the call sheet did a good job. So you better be, you know, so you get tense and you can tighten up that way.
Yeah, and you know, it's. I've always thought the hardest thing to do as an actor was to come in and do one day. You know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to be good. To come in, you don't know anybody. It's your only day. You've got 4 lines, and because it takes away all the things that help you, the familiarity, the relaxation, the ease, the fluidity, and it tends to reinforce that idea. Like, I got to get in there and I get this thing across. And you know, so many times I've worked with actors where I can remember one actor who was like really preoccupied as the director. I was on Gone Baby Gone, and he kept on. He just seemed self-conscious. He seemed like he was trying to force something to happen. And I said, like, what do you like? What's going on? What are you thinking about? He's like, oh, well, I'm going to try to hit the mark. And I was like, okay, forget the mark. Don't hit the mark. I don't care about the mark. He's John Toll shooting the movie. Your focus pullers, they're going to find you, and you're going to look great. I don't want you to be in the mark, but ever think about the mark again. And like, he looked at me like, really? You know what I mean? Like, like I had taken this huge weight off, ankle weights off the guy. All of a sudden, he just kind of smoothed into it, and stuff was great. And he kind of ended up on the mark anyway. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
It was just that was what he was thinking about, and he was nervous about it, and it was on his mind. So he wasn't, thinking about the things that he would have really been thinking about. And so that kind of thing has definitely taught me a lot. And as a young actor, I think, if you show people that you're committed, that you really care, that you're willing to memorize the sides and read the script and work on it and think about it. And I know it's hard because are you going to put, that much, if you have an audition 4 times a week, or 3, that's a lot of investment and work to keep putting into things that I know how it is. You know how it is. You go in for 90 things and get 1, maybe. So it's a lot of frustration and rejection and feeling like I just wasted all this time. And yet that's kind of part of what separates out the people that you really respond to as a director from the people that you don't. The people that come in with the whole idea and are doing a thing and have a take on it and feel alive. And it's not. Look, there are the greatest actors in the world. Meryl Streep, Denzel, Viola Davis, and they clearly have a gigantic amount of talent. That's kind of magical, but I promise you they also work hard.
Oh my God, yeah, of course, yes, yeah. I mean, without question. I think we could say that about everybody that we've worked with that people would call A-list or at the top in any capacity. A production designer, wardrobe supervisor. I mean, all the way across in any job, the best that we've had a chance to work with have a phenomenal work ethic, and because they love what they do so much that it's not work, and they just put their heart and soul into it. And
we got that. Honestly, we had a great high school theater teacher, a guy named Jerry Specca, who really instilled in us, and everybody who took that class, the people that went on to be actors, and of whom there were quite a few, and the people who didn't, that you just to take it really seriously, not take yourself seriously, not be pretentious, not be obnoxious, not put on an act, but take the work you were doing seriously. It mattered that you were on time. It mattered that you invested yourself. You were going to spend a lot of hours. You might be in the background. You might be standing around for 3 hours, not saying anything, but it was really important to him. And I wanted to make him happy, and I respected him so much that, in that this movie kind of reminded me of how important mentorship like that can be for teenagers, for adolescents, kind of trying to figure out how to integrate themselves. How am I going to live in the world? And that's something that even at my most sort of like young and kind of overwhelmed and you know, spun around, I always held on to from Jerry was like, you can rely on working hard. As there is no guarantee of success, but it's the best bet you can make. You put in as much effort as you possibly can, you're going to get the best result that you're going to get. You know, I still credit him for that.
Yeah, and what he was really right about is even if things don't go your way, whatever your way is in any different context, you put your head on the pillow at night and you feel good about what you did, right? Because you left it all out there. And
yeah. And we were talking about like doing this movie and the last couple of years, like you and I have, it's weird to talk about on, you know, on camera for something that we've had so many discussions about, but to repeat it, like just being at a place where you have your own standards, you know what I mean? It's not about like, this movie's got to be a hit. So-and-so's got to say it's good or something. Yeah, there are, you know, I can count on both hands the number of people that I know who are my friends, whose opinions I really respect, who I want to like the movie and appreciate it and kind of see what I'm doing. But really it's about like, you know, and you're obviously chief among them, but it's about like, did I accomplish what I wanted to do? Did I find something interesting here? Was I able to do, you know, do I feel good about it? Maybe nobody went to see the movie, maybe the critics didn't like it, or maybe, but like, and not being so sort of outer oriented about how is it received? How do people like it? What are they saying? What are they saying about me? But how do I feel about what I did?
What's funny is when we wrote Good Will Hunting, remember we had this one thing, which was, this was back in the days, video tapes, right? And we said, if it's just a videotape on our mantle, we want to like it, right? And what's crazy is after 30 years, it's like now you've gone and you've achieved all of these external, I mean, I remember being at your house, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and seeing all these awards on your shelf. And I was like, what the hell is that? And you're like, oh, that's the Spanish Oscar. And that's the French. I didn't know what any of these things were. I'm like, you have every single award. But that external stuff came, but it's now, it's like it's about right where it started. It's just about your work. And
I got those, I got Razzies, I got them all, but you know, it really is about like, it really is about like, you know, because ultimately, like I found like the movies that have meant something to me, you know, have been the experience that I've had, the people I've spent time with, the other, you know, like getting to know, you know, David Fincher, you know what I mean? It was like a really important thing just in my life as a human being. He's a guy I really find interesting and funny and smart and compassionate and a real artist, also kind of with the mind of an engineer. And it's just a joy to know him and to get to know him, as joyful, if not more, than just being in the movie. And I'm glad the movie was successful, and that's great. And but also like just, you know, finishing up this movie with you, we talk about like this is so much more enriching to and you know, to be working together, to be working with somebody that I know and love and respect and want to see and spend time with and hang out with, and realizing that, like, you know, time goes by and how you spend your days defines what your life is going to be, and the quality of that time is really important, and it contributes to I think to the quality of your work.
So that leads me to the next question, and we're probably running out of time soon, but I want to ask a few things. One, and the first thing would be, what does the next 20 years look like for you, right? Given that we're now out of summer and moving into autumn. The
leaves are turning colors. Yeah.
The leaves are turning colors. So what do you want to do? What does victory look like for you for the next 20? If you look back on the next 20 years, what do you want to see?
You know, it's interesting because I'm less like career specific goal. Like I have this movie that does this or that. Like, I mean, I want to be a good father. You know, I want to have more than anything else, really. And that my work is so secondary to that I just really understand that, and I'm at peace with that. And if it means making a compromise in one place for the other, like I'm really good with that, because I'm not going to look back and say I wasn't around as much as I wanted to be. So it means I'll work a little bit less. I want to work with people that I love and care about and respect and spend time with, and, you know, value the time and the things that I learned as a person from them. I want to try to like bring some of my own, what I think is interesting about the world into the movies, you know, and maybe people will also think it's interesting, maybe they won't, but you know, if I don't think it's interesting,
Right.
probably no one else is either.
Well, that's because, right, when we started out, and for all the actors watching this who are starting out, I mean, just work at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to take whatever you can.
Yeah.
We're just in that really fortunate spot to be able to take what we want. And like Bob Dylan apparently always used to say, when somebody would come and tell him about a new artist, he'd say, well, what do they have to say? Right? That was really the measure of what they were. And
that's what I found is really interesting. That's what was really interesting for me about this movie. Last Duel, the same thing, you know, like how am I expressing and contributing to talking about life and the world in ways that I think are interesting and valuable and resonant. And that probably means, you know, a certain kind of movie, you know, like I don't, you know, like dramas but I would do like I don't have any, you know, like just something that's interesting to me. And then I feel like I can do something that's worth investing the amount of energy and my soul and commitment and feelings and history into. Because like now kind of what I'm bringing to a movie every day is a lot of stuff, you know what I mean? And I'm kind of laying it out there and really trying to, you know, dig pretty deep in that way. And I don't want to do it for something that I feel is just uninteresting or insubstantial or people that I don't like or that says something that I object to about the world. I don't need to be on the cover of another magazine as long as I live.
Really?
I don't need to, I would.
So I'm supposed to wrap up because we're probably over time, but let me just ask this last question just because, and they can edit it out or whatever. But it's just about the business in general. It's changed so much since you and I started, right? Since we were taking the train to New York, like in 1986. It's, you know, the first, you know, the movies we started shooting they were different content-wise. They were different technologically. We shot on film. It was a very different business. And so as much or as little as you want, what's your overview of A, how things have changed, and B, like, what do you like about what's new? And what is there anything you're nostalgic about that you wish was still part of the business, besides the fact that they don't make the kind of movies we that are our bread and butter anymore?
There was a kind of like the movies that we grew up idolizing and kind of just inheriting right before we sort of came of age happened to coincide with a really golden age of American cinema, which was the 70s. There were great artists making great films, and studios were supporting that idea. And you know, whether it was Chinatown or The Network or The Verdict or, you know, I mean, all those great movies and all those great actors and actresses. And I'm nostalgic for that. I'm nostalgic for like a time when the business was less kind of IP driven. I think I know that there, even before COVID, there was definitely like a transition away from dramas just because that audience is now competing with such like, there's such good work that's on streamers now that you can really stay home and watch like something just as good, if not better, than the dramas that you're seeing or that you may have the opportunity to see in the theaters. So it's very hard to get that audience to come out and buy tickets on the weekend and be weekend kind of driven. And, you know, on Netflix or whatever, you can wait and watch what you want and pause it and so on. So I lament that I think even after COVID, when theaters reopen, there definitely will be fewer of those kinds of movies released theatrically. But by the same token, you know, The Way Back like came out the weekend they shut down all the theaters, and I was like, oh, right, the movie I'm like the most proud of, and literally closed the movie theaters worldwide. But it turned out to be kind of a blessing for that movie because they rushed into the streaming, and there was this whole captive audience, and it was the new movie, so like way more people watched it than would have otherwise. And I appreciated the value of the fact that people saw it.
Congratulations on a great piece of work. The Way Back is just awesome.
Thanks, man.
You bet.